We're glad that you're here this morning. I'm sure many of you have seen this Christmas movie that came out about 10 years ago now. It's called Elf. And it's, one of Will Ferrell's more family-friendly roles, we'll say. It's a funny Christmas movie, right? And Will Ferrell, he plays this character called Buddy the Elf, right? And Buddy the Elf, he's not, you haven't seen the movie, Buddy the Elf really, he isn't an elf. He's not an elf. He's really a human being. But by accident, when he was a baby, he got accidentally taken to the North Pole, and he ends up growing up in Santa's workshop with his elves, okay? So he grows up into an adult, and no one tells him that he's a human being. So he grows up thinking he's an elf. And as you can imagine, life is kind of tough for Buddy at the North Pole. Because, for starters, he's twice as tall as everybody else, right? Because everyone else is an elf, and he's a human being, he's an adult. He's twice as tall as everybody else, and so the clothes don't fit. And the shoes are way too small. And, the beds, he's got to sleep on two beds shoved together in some, contorted yoga position, and it just doesn't work. And for Buddy, the toilets are way too small, and the shower heads only come up to his stomach, so he's got to lean down and flick water onto his hair to wash. See, life for Buddy is hard at the North Pole. And it's really hard for him when it comes to work, right? To making toys. Because he's a human being, he doesn't possess the magical toy-making skills that the elves possess, right? Because we all know elves have magical toy-making skills. And so, no matter how hard Buddy tries, he just can't keep up with the other elves. No matter how hard he works, he can't seem to make enough etch-a-sketches to fill his quota for the day. And so he falls behind day after day after day. And he feels like a failure. Life for Buddy in the North Pole is filled with disappointment. He feels like he's not good at anything. He sticks out like a sore thumb, and he calls himself a cotton-headed ninny-muggins. He's like, I'm not good at anything. I'm a cotton-headed ninny-muggins. And so one day, by accident, Buddy discovers he's actually not an elf. Sorry if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to spoil it for you. But he discovers he isn't an elf. He's actually a human being. And obviously, this rocks his world, right? Because all along, he thought he was just a freakishly tall elf. And now he realizes that I'm not an elf at all. I'm a human being. And so he decides, I need to leave. I need to go to New York City where supposedly my dad is. I need to find my dad. I need to discover who I am. Right? And so he leaves, and it's this comical escapade. He goes to New York City, and things go wrong, and things go right, and things start going crazy for him. But eventually he finds his dad, and things start to click for him. Because Buddy all of a sudden is in the world where he was created to be. Right? He's no longer trying to live as a human being in the elf's world. He finds life in the human world where he was supposed to be. And he meets a girl, and he falls in love, and he ends up saving Christmas at the end of the day and being a hero. You see, and life changes for Buddy when he starts living in the world that he was supposed to be in all along. Things click for him, and all of a sudden, the beds are comfortable, and the toilets are ginormous, and life is just good for Buddy the Elf when he becomes a human being and starts living in the world he was supposed to be in all along. You see, and I think we can relate to Buddy the Elf a lot of the times, can't we? I know I can. I feel like Buddy the Elf a lot when he's at the North Pole, because it seems like no matter how hard I try in this life, things just don't quite click for me the way I want them to. No matter how hard I push, no matter how hard I strive, I just can't seem to make things go right in this world. And I feel like a cotton-headed ninny-muggins. I feel disappointed, unsatisfied. No matter how hard I strive, no matter how hard I work, no matter what things I chase in this world, I'm constantly left with this sense of unfulfillment, of doubt, of disappointment, and if I'm honest, depression. Because this world, I can't make things go right in this world. I feel like Buddy the Elf trying to live at the North Pole, and I'm just not good enough. We feel that way a lot of the time. See, and as we strive and work to try and make things click for us, the truth slowly starts to sink in, right? We slowly start to realize that nothing that this physical world has to offer us can ever satisfy the longings of our heart. Those longings for love, for joy, for peace, for contentment, we all are looking for that. And we all look for it in things of this physical world. We all try and strive and chase after things that will give us this sense of fulfillment. And none of it satisfies. And we're left feeling empty and broken. And we slowly start to realize that maybe this isn't the world I'm supposed to be living in. Because nothing this world has to offer me ever satisfies me. It may make me happy for a day, or maybe a week, but eventually it wears off. And I'm left with the same familiar emptiness and disappointment that I've been living with this whole time. You see, and this isn't a new discovery. This isn't a new problem. It goes back all the way through Scripture, all the way back to the beginning of time. King Solomon talks about it. This truth that the physical world can never fulfill the deep desires of our heart. I'm going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Solomon's book of wisdom. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. I'm going to start in verse 4 because Solomon talks about this. He discovers this truth painfully. And he writes about it. So Solomon starts in verse 4 of chapter 2. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in all of Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers, and I had a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all of my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Verse 11. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. You see, Solomon says, look, I had it all. I had money out the nose. I had slaves. I had gardens. I had anything you could ever want. If my eyes saw it, I took it. If my heart wanted it, I grabbed it. I took advantage of everything this world had to offer. And I was the greatest person in all of Jerusalem. And you know what it all was when I sat down at the end of the day and I looked at it? It was empty. It was chasing after the wind. It was meaningless. It left me wanting more. He goes on in chapter 5, verse 10. He says, whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. He says, look, no matter how much you attain, no matter how much you gain, it's never enough. The things of this world never seem to satisfy. He goes on in chapter 6, verse 7. He says, all man's efforts are for his mouth, and yet his appetite is never satisfied. You see, we get this picture that, look, we are running around in this physical world trying to satisfy the deep longings of our soul for fulfillment, for love, for joy, for contentment, for peace. And no matter how much we gain, no matter how much we chase, it's all empty. It's like trying to chase the wind. You see, and all of a sudden we start to realize this truth. we start to realize this truth that no matter what we do in this physical world, we're never going to be able to fulfill ourselves. And this world tells us to chase after those things, doesn't it? It says, oh, you want to feel happy? You want to feel joyful? Well, get a lot of money. Money will make you happy. So we chase after money. We chase after the job promotion, the bigger paycheck, all this kind of stuff. And we amass all this money, and at the end of the day, it's never quite enough. And it leaves us feeling empty. So the world says, oh, okay, well, that didn't do it for you? You're still looking for success and a sense of fulfillment? Well, then chase power. Chase stature. And so we go after that stuff, and it's never enough. And so the world says, well, go to the other end of the spectrum then. If that doesn't do it for you, maybe drugs, sex, and rock and roll will do it for you. Maybe that will give you a high. Maybe that will make you fulfilled. Maybe that will satisfy you. And as we go and chase after all the things that this world tells us to chase after, we begin to realize that none of it can ever fulfill the longings of our hearts. This physical broken world can never satisfy us. Because here's the truth. We weren't meant to live in this broken physical world. Just like Buddy was not meant to live at the North Pole in the elves world, we, as spiritual creations of God, were not meant to live in this broken physical world. You see, and so that's why everything this world has to offer us can never satisfy us. Because this is not our home. And so the way that we find that fulfillment, the way that we find what we're really after, is when we start living in the world we were supposed to live in all along. And that world, our home, lies in a relationship with God. See, because as spiritual creations of God, we were meant to be in a relationship with our Creator. And when we are in a relationship with our Creator, then all of a sudden, He pours into our lives the longings of our hearts. The things of this physical world will never be able to fill us. But through a relationship with God, we start living in the world we are supposed to live in. We start living out of that relationship, and we find fulfillment. You see, and so Jesus talked about this. Jesus talks about life in the world that we're supposed to live in. He says, you want to look at a picture of what it looks like when you start living fulfilled, when you start living satisfied? Matthew chapter 5. He starts talking about it in the Sermon on the Mount. He gives us pictures of this. He starts his sermon. He says, you want to know what life, the good life, looks like? This is what it's like. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. See, those of you in the world who are dealing with tragedy, who are suffering, if you are living in a relationship with me, in the midst of that suffering, my relationship will fill you up, and you will be comforted in the midst of the mourning. And blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Those of you who never stand up for yourselves, who never speak up, who always get trampled on, pushed aside by other people, forgotten. When you start living in a relationship with me, in the midst of being trampled upon, my relationship with you is going to fill you up so that you are inheriting the earth in the midst of being trampled on. And blessed are the persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, you, when you're getting beaten and thrown in jail and brutally murdered because of me, because of your relationship with me, in the midst of the persecution, you are living in the kingdom of heaven. You see, Jesus comes and he gives us this picture. He says, you want to know what the good life looks like? It's found in a relationship with me. And when you're in a relationship with me, all of a sudden, no matter what's going on in this world, you could be mourning, you could be being trampled upon and forgotten about, you could be being persecuted and killed. And in the midst of all of that, because of your relationship with me, you have a satisfaction, you have a fulfillment that this world can never touch, that this world can never take away. See, that is where our lives should be wrapped up, in a relationship with Christ. You see, and all of a sudden, we start finding a peace and a comfort in our relationship with God, in our relationship with our Creator, that nothing this world can do can shatter. We find a fulfillment in God that no matter what happens in this world, that is never taken away. That is always there. Habakkuk, a minor prophet. Open up to Habakkuk if you know how to find it. Chapter 3. This is a picture of what it looks like living life in a relationship with God, so much so that you are filled no matter what is going on. Habakkuk chapter 3, I'm going to be in verse 17. He says, though the fig tree does not bud, there are no grapes on the vines. Though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food. Though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to go on the heights. You see, when we are in a relationship with God, so much so that our lives are wrapped up in that, and we start living out of that relationship, and it takes over every aspect of our life, then all of a sudden, no matter what happens in this life, we can't help but be filled with joy and satisfaction and fulfillment, so that we can stand there with Habakkuk and say, even though there's no food, and I've got no cattle, and I don't know where I'm going to eat next, I am still joyful in God because He is my strength. He's the one that's filling me up. And nothing that happens in this world can ever take that away from me. And you could go on and talk about situations we deal with today. Right? You say, even though I'm dealing with tragedy, and I don't know how to get out of bed in the morning, and even though I'm going through a divorce, and my marriage is falling apart, and even though I'm bankrupt, and I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, and even though I just found out I have cancer, yet, in all of that, I am joyful in God. The sovereign Lord is my strength, and I rejoice in Him. You see, we start living in that world, and all of a sudden, this physical world can't empty us out anymore because we've been filled. You see, and we can stand with Habakkuk and say, there's nothing this world can do to me anymore because I'm in a relationship with my Creator, and He's the one that holds the deep desires of my heart. And so all of a sudden, we can start looking at this world in a different way. All of a sudden, we can start living this kind of life today. That's the good news, the good piece about this. That's the gospel. Jesus comes and says, you want the good life? Do you want to be fulfilled? Do you want to be satisfied? You can start all of that today. You can know life sweeter than you ever thought possible right now in a relationship with me, and you can start living in the kingdom of heaven today. So much so that death no longer seems like a big deal. Because the promise in Jesus is that when we are living out a relationship with Him, our lives, the ones we're so familiar with right now, the ones that are going in and day out, they will never end. If our lives are wrapped up in our relationship with God, our life will never end. Your life can start living in the kingdom of heaven today for the rest of eternity. And all of a sudden, death is nothing to be scared of. We stand here and we go, I am already living in the kingdom of heaven. What can death do to me? Where, O death, is your sting? We can stand with Paul and we say, look, to live is Christ. To die is gain. Nothing that this physical world can do can touch that. And we start living with the satisfaction and the fulfillment that we've been looking for all along, that we've been chasing our entire lives. It's found in a relationship with God. And when we start living out of our relationship with God, then all of a sudden we will find ourselves living in the world we were supposed to live in all along. And things just start to click. And we don't have to be afraid anymore. And we will be filled with the satisfaction and the fulfillment that we've been looking for all along. And so we can start living that life right now. Right now, you can start living this life with this satisfaction, with this fulfillment, so much so that no matter what happens, we are safe and at home in our relationship with God. So much so that we don't have to be afraid of death anymore. And we start living in the kingdom of heaven for the rest of eternity. And so we need to start living in the world we were created to live in. Just like Buddy the elf, who didn't really find life very satisfying when he was trying to live in the elf's world, but when he shifted to the human world, things started to click for him. We, as spiritual creations of God, need to stop trying to live in this broken physical world. We need to stop trying to chase the things that this world tells us will make us happy and complete and whole. And we need to start living in the world we were created to live in, which is in a relationship with God. And so the question that you have to ask yourself is pretty simple this morning. It's, are you tired of being empty? Are you tired of being disappointed? Are you tired of being just run down all the time, never good enough? Are you tired of chasing after the wind? Because it can all stop. It can all stop right now, today. Jesus offers it to you. He says, look, you want what I have. I have what you want. Stop trying to go other places and find it and just come to me. And you can do that right now, today, whenever you want to. Jesus is here, standing, offering it freely, saying, if you would just enter into an intimate relationship with me, you will find all the desires of your heart. You will be satisfied. Satisfied. You will start living the good life right now. So much so that you can say, the poor are rich, the blind can see, the lame can walk. And no matter what this world does to me, I am secure and safe because I'm already living in the kingdom of heaven with God. That's the good news. That's what Jesus came to share with us. And so just like Buddy shifted to the world that he was supposed to be living in all along, that's what Jesus invites you to do today. To shift your life into his life. To shift your hopes and dreams to be fulfilled by him and no longer be fulfilled by the emptiness of this broken world. And so you need to make that choice for yourself. Say, okay, I'm going to start living in the world I was created to live in. I'm going to start living in the world I was meant to live in as a spiritual creation of God. And just like Buddy, make that shift to start allowing God to fulfill and satisfy